The beginning of freshman year was an exciting time for me. Before college, I had been in the same school from kindergarten to 8th grade, and it was a very small school, so everything there was very familiar and at the time seemed very dull to me. When I stepped into this school on the first day and saw how big the school was and all the people around, I felt like I had stepped into a new world full of opportunities to learn many incredible things and make a lot of amazing new friends. When Mrs. Thornburg told us on the first day that the things we were going to learn in humanities would blow our minds, I had high hopes and I literally trembled with excitement. Unfortunately, that excitement soon turned into disappointment. I had trouble making friends, mainly because I tried to be funny and outgoing despite the fact that I have never been either of those things. I also quickly realized that I was one of the few people who didn't have many friends from middle school with me. Humanities didn't turn out to be as mind-blowing as I had hoped. I learned some interesting things about the various cultures of the world and read some interesting books that I never would have been exposed to otherwise, but it didn't feel satisfying enough. I was just absorbing facts and retaining information just like I've always done. Nothing ever gave me a drastically different or shocking perspective of the world around me. All the supposedly mind-blowing things that we were taught, like symbolism, myths, illusion, and stuff like that, were nothing new to me. To me, most of the year was filled with tedious projects and presentations that didn't really teach me anything or accurately demonstrate my comprehension of the subject. It was just busy work to me. That was the first step in my descent, the death of my optimism. However, there was one instance that did somewhat enlighten me. In the play Inherit the Wind, when Henry Drummond put the Bible and Darwin's Origin of Species together in his briefcase, it made me ponder my own perception of the world. I was, and still am, an atheist, but back then I was more ignorant and egotistical about my beliefs. I used to think that people who followed religion were nothing more than mindless sheep, and that I was superior to them. I thought it was impossible for theists and atheists to coexist peacefully because I used to have the us against them mentality, meaning that I used to think that people who disagreed on significant issues like religion and politics could never completely get along. After reading that scene in the play, I began to abandon that mentality, and my superiority complex faded along with it. I became a little more open-minded and realized that people can disagree without being enemies. That was the next step in my descent, the death of my arrogance. Sophomore year was filled with even more disappointments. This time it wasn't over my expectations of high school, but my expectations of myself. People have always considered me to be the smart kid, and before this year I had always felt that way about myself too. I felt like it was my one redeeming feature, my only talent that would help me be successful in life. Once I took AP European History, I couldn't see myself that way anymore. It was the first class that I had ever struggled with, and I had trouble understanding it. I was too ashamed to ask for help because everyone expected me to always know everything, and I expected that I would always know everything too. I was embarrassed and disappointed in myself, which made me extremely depressed, especially since it seemed like almost everyone else was doing well in that class. Since then, I have ceased to consider myself to be just a smart kid, although a lot of people still define me based on that label. That title used to make me feel superior to other people, so much so that I used to judge people based on their academic performance and disregard everything they said or did if they did not live up to my expectations. Now I've accepted the fact that I don't know everything, and I will never know everything. I also learned that it's foolish to look down on people just because they haven't read as much as me or can't recite as many useless facts as I can. This year was another step in my descent, the death of my pride. Junior year was my favorite year because it was the only year in which I didn't have to go through some sort of negative experience in order to make progress in my personal development. It is also the year that I took my favorite class, AP Biology. That is the only class that I had taken at this school that blew my mind, which was surprising and refreshing since I thought it would be just another typical science class. Before this class I had always liked science, but I never truly appreciated it until I took this course. Learning about the intricacies of the parts and processes of life gave me a completely new perspective of the world. Things that I used to never think much of, like plants, insects, and my own body, became a lot more fascinating once I learned what was really going on inside them. Suddenly all the living things around me that used to be just insignificant ornaments in the background began to look completely different to me. The trees that I glanced over and the grass that I thoughtlessly stepped on every day weren't so insignificant once I learned that they are composed of the same basic components as me. I began to feel a sort of kinship with all living things, and their existence seemed to be more important, while mine seemed less important. I stopped viewing non-human organisms as inferior beings and began seeing them as just beings, like me. This realization sparked my interest in understanding and appreciating the natural world at all of its levels. It made me want to learn as much as I could about everything from subatomic particles to all the various celestial bodies in our universe. Realizing how insignificant I am in the grand scheme of things may seem like a bad thing, but it helped me appreciate myself more. By acknowledging how petty my existence is, I stopped worrying so much about trying to be the best at everything I tried. My failures didn't bother me so much anymore, and I stopped caring so much about other people's opinions of me. I stopped trying to fit in with everyone else and went back to all the things that I used to enjoy that I had abandoned in my attempt to flow along with the mainstream crowd. While this has been liberating, it has caused me to distance myself from people in general, and I have lost the desire that I used to have to actively gain knowledge, which has caused me to become complacent. This is the next step in my descent, the death of my passion. Senior year was an unremarkable year in terms of academic development, mainly because I didn't take any interesting or challenging courses this year. On the other hand, my personal life has been a true whirlwind of emotion, and unfortunately that whirlwind spiraled downwards most of the time. Most of the events that caused this are too personal to go into detail about, but they have caused me to reflect on myself a lot more than I used to. That is mainly because this year, a lot of people have decided to analyze and criticize my actions and decisions much more often and more harshly than they used to. I've always been ridiculed and looked down upon because of my lifestyle choices and interests, such as not dating, not having sex, not drinking alcohol or doing other drugs, not listening to mainstream music, not having the same priorities in life as everyone else, and a ton of other things. Overall, I'm usually mocked just because I don't live my life the same way as the majority of people, and this bothers a lot of them for some reason. Before this year, I never gave a second thought to these criticisms, but now I've decided to take these things to heart and truly ponder if it is reasonable to live my life this way. I want to keep doing what I'm doing because I don't want to have to live the way that everyone else expects me to, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure if I want to keep living this way either. I'm at a point where I'm not entirely sure where I am going in life, and that doesn't really bother me. Perhaps I have finally hit rock bottom and ended my descent, and now I'm in a position where I can choose to ascend or dig my own hole and keep going deeper. I don't mind that I don't know where I'm going, as long as I just keep going someplace instead of sitting still and never progressing. Whatever path I choose will bring me new experiences that allow me to grow further, and that is what I feel is most important, to never stop growing.